Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack. Now, I've tried every single healer and healer tier set combination going into Season 3 in the new dungeon, the Aldani Ecodome, and now I want to give my thoughts in a tier list. Now, don't take this too seriously. It's the very beginning of the season, 8 weeks to go, blah, 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 but here's what I'm picking based off of fun, vibes, and also performance at the moment, which of course can change. Starting it off, you know it's no surprise. Disc Priest Oracle is starting us off in the S tier. The 2-set bonus is causing the first bolt of each penance cast to be doing 200% more damage or healing. The 4-set bonus is causing your Piety or Solace premonitions to grant 2 stacks of insight at 100% effectiveness, and consuming those stacks increases your haste. Now, what this actually does and how this works is basically penance stronger, Unga bunga. Then, whenever you're casting your Piety and your Solace, you're getting these Premonition of Insight casts, which give you cooldown reduction, which allow you to cast more penance, which is awesome. And there's 2 main ways that this is going to function. In a raid, you always use Insight and Piety together for your evangelism ramp. And what this is going to cause is for you to, instead of having 3 Insight charges, you'll have 5, allowing you to mash 6 penances, since of course the 5 are only cooldown reduction and then 6 is the final one, allowing you to cast 6 penances for a fat ramp and pop off. But there's more. Solace has usually been this ability you kind of freely cast and freely get rid of in a raid whenever you might need a defensive or something like that. Now you could hold Solace so that you can hold it with Clairvoyance, because it'll also activate cooldown reduction for Insight, allowing you to also have 5 Insight charges for your Clairvoyance window as well, making your raid ramps really strong, ultra reliable, and more mobile since you're just channeling 6 straight penances. That really is super insane. Now, in a 5-man environment, it's also insane because penance and defensive penance are going to have a lot of value still. And there's a lot of times where you're not using Insight or Piety together in a 5-man. And so now when you have Piety up, a lot of times in dungeons, you try to combo it with another ability. You combo it with Up-Ease. You combo it with Evangelism to maximize the overheal protection. Now what you can also do is give yourself some breathing room with extra penance casts when you activate your Piety, because usually you activate one of those abilities, you have a lot of strong healing for like 5 or 7 seconds, and then it ends. And now with the Insight charges, it makes the 15-second Piety window that much stronger. Additionally, when you have Solace up, this is a great time to get extra penances and more powerful power word shields, because what you can do is activate Solace, defensive pen somebody to apply a shield to them, then apply a power word shield to a second target, then cast your next penance, and then you cast another shield on another target, and then boom, you've got 3 fat shields on players in a heartbeat. Additionally, the tier set bonus gives you haste, and haste reduces the cooldown of your penance and your power word shield. So you get a lot more of the good stuff. Is basically the best way to put it. The stuff you're good at, it makes you better at. It freaking owns, and it should be on everybody's S tier list. Next up, we've got Wildstalker Druid, okay? 2-set bonus is the rate at which your symbiotic blooms grow is increased by 40%, and casting regrowth with clear casting causes your blooms to grow on up to 2 nearby allies. So the blooms are, of course, the extra hot component Wildstalker Druid is giving you, and the 4-set bonus is the blooms have a 20% chance to trigger bursting growth every 2 seconds at 100% effectiveness. Each stack of the blooms on an ally increases the bursting growth healing taken by 30%. So what does all this mean? It means that you are spreading around new flowers, new blooms onto your allies so much faster than before. And when you have clear casting to give you the free regrowths, you have a lot of different buffs in your spec tree that are making those regrowths stronger, free, all of that good stuff. But now you're also putting additional blooms on your allies, and they can stack up. I was having some go up to like 4 or 5 stacks on PTR and churning out an insane amount of healing. They ended up doing, I think at the end of the run, like 25 or 30% of my overall healing for that dungeon run as a Wildstalker Druid. So the spot heal, the single target heal that you are able to churn out is just really, really strong. I would not be surprised if this is maybe a little bit too strong, But that's a conversation for later on. At the moment, it's very fun, it's very powerful. I was not focusing too much on like the damage aspect or anything like that with Wildstalker, but I think once I would get some more experience with it and more practice with it, getting used to all your activators to apply all your symbiotic blooms will make it that much easier for you to go into cat form, start churning out some extra damage when you can, because the blooms, the way that they're spreading, you kind of just cast a couple spells, you're preparing for damage, and not only are you getting the hot spread that you need, but you're also building up a crazy amount of these blooms onto all of your allies very, very quickly. It's kind of just starting like an almost pandemic effect onto a bunch of your allies. It's almost like a dot spread, it feels like, whenever you're playing with it, because you just kind of immediately start covering all your allies and the ones that you are prioritizing too, which makes your spot healing, your focused single target healing even stronger on top of that. And it really feels like you're able to just focus healing into the targets that you need to, which is great because that new dungeon had a lot of areas where 2 targets were taking a ton of damage, and playing Wildstalker in that environment made healing them feel effortless. Next on the S tier, we've got Oracle HPriest. The 2-set bonus is when you cast Prayer of Mending, you also heal your target. The actual effect of it is about half of the strength of a Holy Word Serenity, if you can imagine that. The 4-set bonus is just like the Disc 4-set bonus. Your Piety and Solace grant you 2 stacks each of Premonition of Insight at full strength. Consuming those stacks gives you haste. So the real benefit to this is that it makes Oracle HPriest a lot better with sustained healing in a couple of different ways. The first of which is your 2-set bonus that you are casting Prayer of Mending. It actually does some good healing. You get direct healing from your 2-set bonus, you apply Prayer of Mending, and you also apply a Power Word Shield. The shields are very weak, don't get me wrong, but they're like 3 to 5% of a player's maximum health, which is not nothing. And the fact that you're directly healing them, putting a small absorb on top, makes casting the spell feel a lot better in general. One of the big problems Holy Priest has had in 5-mans is that Prayer of Mendings are pretty low on the priority when everyone's taking a bunch of damage, but they have so much impact when there's steady damage happening in a party that it feels really bad when you miss out onto those casts. And so as a result, you kind of get into this period where you fall behind on casting your Prayer of Mendings and then you pay for it later. This fixes that problem. Getting the extra stacks of Premonition of Insight, which is your cooldown reduction out of Oracle, then gets spent on Prayer of Mendings. Of course, you can spend it on Holy Fires if you wanted to do some damage too. That works as well. But ideally, you spend it on Prayer of Mendings, you get better single target healing, which is always in high demand for Holy Priest, and it helps your healing later on down the line as well. This is a really, really powerful tier set, not only for a 5-man environment, for giving you that better single target healing, where the single target effect that it gave me was like 10% of my overall healing at one point in the dungeon, but it's also absurdly good in raids because the twin side effect out of Oracle doesn't give you, penance like it does for Disc. It gives you more Prayer of Mendings. And so it starts firing off extra Prayer of Mendings to allies throughout the raid. When you combine this tier set bonus with Answered Prayers, which procs Apotheosis for you, some of the other supporting talents that are extending the duration of Apotheosis for you, you sit in Apotheosis form for an enormously long time when you play as Oracle, which is really important since they did nerf the mana return, or the mana discount for your Holy Words while you're in Apotheosis, but it's still half off, and it's still a lot of value. And Oracle is still going to give you higher uptime out of it than you would get out of Archon. Additionally, the haste does have some benefit since Prayer of Mending is a hasted cooldown. More haste, more Prayer of Mendings you're getting out, and you just have additional value from the single target healing, and it just makes your premonition cooldowns more substantial, which is very important for Oracle in a 5-man environment, because you need to be able to rely on more than just Apotheosis to carry you. I really think this tier set is just as nuts for Holy as it is for Disc. Our last spec in the S tier is Preservation's Chronowarden tier set bonus. The 2 set is giving you 60 seconds off of your Tip the Scales ability. This is enormously important for Chronowarden Evokers. Big reason for it is because of Temporal Burst. Whenever you activate your Tip the Scales, not when you consume it, but when you activate it, it is filling you up with the temporal energy, increasing your haste, move speed, and cooldown recovery rate, and it decays over time. The really important thing about this is getting a greater access to tip the scales. Not only is just allowing you to cast it more, of course, but allows you to cast it more aggressively. And by doing so, it is further able to encourage you to play more aggressively with a couple of cooldowns, because you know you have this wealth of cooldown reduction coming back. I think a big struggle that I've personally experienced with playing Preservation Evoker has been, what do you do when you kind of run out of your empowers? It's an extremely focused and preemptive healer, and you have to be thinking through when the damage is going to happen, when you want to build up your stasis, and if you fall behind, it can be disastrous. I feel like it's the most proactive healer that I played thus far in Season 3's PTR. And as a result, having 60 seconds off of a cooldown that not only is going to give you an instant full strength and power spell, but also gives you a mess of cooldown reduction for your other spells, namely getting more Spirit Blooms out there, is super, super important for healing in a 5-man environment. So far, Chronowarden and the tier set bonus make you feel incredibly, incredibly strong, and the 4-set bonus continues to help that, because when Temporal Burst is active, your Chrono Flames are striking additional targets and repeating additional damage or healing, and again, up to that maximum on your spell power. The extra repeat effects make having things like Life Spark, for example, with the instant cast Living Flames that you're getting access to, feel really, really strong, especially when you can get those moments where you can just start dumping extra healing into allies with priority target debuffs like I was mentioning earlier. This makes it a lot easier to be able to play in a 5-man environment, and I think it's exactly what Chronowarden has needed to sort of help it get a little bit more breathing room, because when you know you have a lot more cooldown reduction on hand, it's a lot easier to use that ability frequently, aggressively, and to be able to help you return some of those empower abilities before the next big burst of AoE comes out. To start us off on the A tier, we have Mistweaver's Conduit of the Celestials, and this is mainly going to be focused on raiding, but we'll talk a little bit about M+ for it right here. Heart of the Jade Serpent is the 2-set bonus, is additionally triggered for 8 seconds at full effectiveness after you cast Thunder Focus Tea. Now, if you don't know what Heart of the Jade Serpent is, this is the cooldown reduction that is usually granted by casting Sheilun's Gift, reducing the cooldown of your Thunder Focus Tea, Rising Sun Kick, Rushing Wind Kick, Renewing Mist, spells like that, your Life Cocoon as well. It is triggering that additional window of cooldown reduction for you. And the 4-set bonus goes hand in hand in that Heart of the Jade Serpent increases your haste by 15% while active and for 4 seconds afterwards. This, especially for a raid environment, which we haven't had raid testing yet, but I'm going to make the crazy bold prediction that getting more Heart of the Jade Serpent is going to feel insanely, insanely good. Being able to have it proc not only off of your Sheiluns, which you're usually using with Xiaohao's lessons, you're kind of timing it before big damage events are going to be happening. Being able to also have this on hand with your Thunder Focus Tea is just going to glut you with buttons to be able to press. You're going to be able to pump out way more Renewing Mists. You're going to be able to get additional cooldown reduction for your Rushing Wind Kick by having more Renewing Mists being cast, and your Rushing Wind Kick's going to come back faster because of the Heart of the Jade Serpent, and so you are just going to have an insane amount of buttons to be mashing, especially when you're in a raid environment after you cast your Thunder Focus Tea. This is all going to come together to be able to make it so that the hot coverage that especially a Yu'lon Rushing Wind Kick type build in raids, which is most popular right now, this is just going to have it accelerate faster, also help them pump out more damage at priority moments, which is really, really powerful, especially in a Race to World First environment. And I think in a lot of ways it can help them be even more mana efficient than I feel like they already are in a raid, allowing them to absolutely crank some huge damage. And it's also important to note that this alone isn't everything. The changes they made to Vivacious Vivification, which is the instant cast Vivify talent, that is now being changed to no longer proc every 10 seconds with an instant Vivify, but it procs an instant Vivify after every Rising Sun Kick. And so, with the Heart of the Jade Serpent effect from Conduit of the Celestials, making it trigger more often, giving you more Rushing Wind Kicks, let's say, for a raid, this is going to allow you to just smash back and forth between really high value Vivifies you can cast on the move, getting more access to Renewing Mist, getting more access to a lot of your very efficient healing spells. and allowing you to blast tons of output in a raid. Super, super cool. I'm really excited to test this out when raids come out. I did play with it in dungeons just to kind of get a feel for it. And while it's nice getting more Rising Sun kick because I was playing more of a fist weaving type build, it's, it's fine, but it's not nearly as powerful, noticeable as I feel like playing Master of Harmony is, but we'll get to that a little bit later. It still feels like it's a solid option. It's a good option and everything like that for dungeons. Just playing Master of Harmony feels a little bit better. And I think that's okay, given that some other hero talents are very much focused on raid, very much focused on M+, and that's kind of how it goes sometimes. So really fun. I think it's gonna be super cool to play with. The next on our A tier is Totemic Shaman. The 2-set bonus, after you consume all the Whirling Elements motes, you cast Downpour at 200% effectiveness at your Surging Totem's location. Now, Whirling Elements is whenever you drop your Surging Totem, you get 3 different buffs. The water buff, your next Healing Wave or Healing Surge, also heals another ally in your Healing Rain. You have the cast time of your next spell being reduced by 40%. I believe that's the lightning one. And then you have the earthen one where your next chain heal applies earth living at 150% effectiveness to all targets hit. So you have to cast 2 spells. You cast a single target spell, you cast a chain heal, and once you have fulfilled both requirements, then the downpour is triggered at 200% effectiveness. And again, it's at the location of where your totem is already at. Big points here. It seems like it's a lot to play around, but you kind of just have to get used to the sequence of always consuming all of your motes, no matter what, especially if you want to get the free healing out of it. The great part about it is that it hits 200% harder, and there's a lot of times where Downpours felt like a solid spell, but almost one you want to cast before incoming damage to get the increased stamina buff. Unless, of course, you had like Ascendance up or something along those lines, of course. Now you're having additional power behind that downpour effect, and it's going to make it even easier for you to be able to cast huge amounts of healing and to better deal with a lot of burst damage. This is going to make things, I think, a lot easier for Shaman in general when it comes to large healing encounters and like difficult healing encounters, because you can always put up a downpour for the bonus stamina for your allies beforehand and then play around when you want to consume this extra heal effect, and it hits incredibly hard. The benefit as well is after you cast Downpour, your next Chain Heal, Healing Wave, or Healing Surge cast again at 150% effectiveness. So one of the nice things that you can do is with this 4-set bonus, you can drop the totem, consume the first of the buffs, the water buff with like Healing Wave or Healing Surge. Then after that, you will have already triggered your downpour one time, and then you can cast a chain heal, which will trigger your second downpour and also be buffed by your 4-set bonus to trigger at 150% effectiveness, which can give you a massive lay on hands for your group when you're in a 5-man environment. Super powerful to sort of stack these effects on top of each other. And there has been some shamans running with Cloudburst, some with Living Stream. I think the highest parses these days in Raid are running with Cloudburst Totem. And Cloudburst always loves it when you can stack multiple bursty healing effects on top of each other into a narrow window of time, juicing up that totem and making it absolutely blast tons of healing. This is only going to help that. And Shaman, it doesn't really need to have a super complicated set of abilities or anything along those lines. Totemic has often been talked about as being one of the healers that is easiest to get into and easiest to get started with. So I really like the overall objective benefit that you can always get by just using the tier set and just using Downpour. That's great. But also, I like that there's another element that you can further amplify your burst output by playing around the whirling element modes. I think that the capstone really for Totemic has kind of been ignored for a while, or not felt rewarding enough is probably a better way to put it. And I really enjoy that they're having this to kind of bring some extra attention to it, because I think a lot of times players will consume most of the element motes, but not always, or sometimes you're kind of just leaving one on the table because you don't need it for that situation. Adding better rewards for it to really incentivize you to play with it is going to be incredibly nice, both in raids and in keys. This is very easily controllable. It's really nice output, and it's another element of survivability for you and your allies that you can plan around, and you're rewarded for playing around. So I really like that about Shaman. The next two on our A tier are Holy Paladin related. Started off with Herald of the Sun. The 2-set bonus, Dawnlight, the hot that you get from Herald of the Sun with your spenders from Holy Prism. These are increased by 30%, and you gain a buff called Solar Wrath after your wings fades, your Avenging Wrath fades, causing Sun's avatar, which is the laser beams that you plug out to the players with Dawnlight. Basically, it causes your Sun's Avatar to linger for an additional period of time and to make your Dawnlights heal for more. Your 4-set bonus is causing this same buff, this same moment after your wings ends, to continue your laser beams out to your allies. This is also increasing the effectiveness of your Holy Power spenders by 15% and grants you 2 Dawnlights. That way you're going to be able to put out more Dawnlights and continue to have more laser beams going out to your allies. This is really cool because this is not as direct of a buff to your wings uptime as it is a buff for the downtime for when you play the spec. Now, Paladin has really felt fun and really felt strong when wings are up, and it's felt really, really garbage when wings are down. And so being able to have this sort of extended period to buy you a little bit of time and make downtime feel less debilitating for the spec is really helpful for what they kind of bring to the table. They're doing it in an interesting way where they're incentivizing more Sun's Avatar healing, which is of course the laser lines cutting through your allies and healing and damaging. One of the big issues I've had with Herald of the Sun when it comes to a raiding environment is it feels like there's almost too much healing attached to things like Sun's Avatar, where you want to have everyone stacked up and close together, when historically Paladin really hasn't had any issues from like a long-term perspective of proximity, and they're kind of forcing more of those things on, if you think about it, with like beacons requiring you to be close to people. Now Herald of the Sun, you want to have all these people close to you to maximize your laser beams, and I think that's a weight really on the spec that I don't enjoy it having. That being said, this is really fun to play because you're able to start micromanaging and thinking about player positioning to be able to reward you. So it's rewarding gameplay, but I also wish that it wasn't fixated on players being stacked all the time. That being said, it's really cool to be able to maximize your damage in a dungeon, because a lot of times you can just position yourself a little bit better, drag a bunch of laser beams through enemies, and start pumping out some additional damage. That always feels really satisfying. So I like how the gameplay system works if you're kind of accepting that you want to maximize it. I just wish it wasn't so focused on having everyone stacked. Either way, fun tier set bonus, and it's probably going to be really good in the next raid too. Also on our A tier list is Lightsmith Holy Paladin. The 2-set bonus, Hammer and Anvil, and just as a reminder, Hammer and Anvil is when your judgment crits. It causes a shockwave around the target, which is healing at the target's location, okay? That healing is increased by 15%, and it can also be activated by Crusader Strike at full effectiveness. This is really, really important because Blessed Assurance, which is another of the hero talents that Lightsmith brought, this was buffing up the damage of your next Crusader Strike when you were playing as Holy Pally by a really heavy margin, and they actually ended up nerfing that. Now it's still strong. Of course, you gotta cast a Holy Power ability first before you Crusader Strike to sort of break it up and get the buff. It's gonna be strong, but it's also gonna really heavily incentivize going after and stacking an insane amount of crit, because activating Hammer and Anvil off Crusader Strike and Judgment at the end of the expansion, when our haste secondary stats are really, really high, and we're able to get our secondary stats enormously high, could be really ridiculous. You think about all the buffs and secondaries that we're picking up from like the borrowed power right now in Season 2. Think about how that's going to be at the end of the expansion, when historically they raised it to insane, like biblical levels. Now the 4-set bonus is granting you a stack of Masterwork, causing your next Holy Armament to cast one lesser version of itself on a nearby ally for each stack. So the more times you're critting, the more times you're proccing the Hammer and Anvil healing effect, and the more times you're doing that, you're also throwing out more armaments onto your allies. I believe, I'm gonna hit you with a citation needed on this one, but I believe that the armaments are also proccing Tempered in Battle. That was my impression after looking at details and seeing like a second drop down and everything like that for it. If that's possible, that's a nice another additional benefit for like efficiency for your healing and stuff for Holy Pally, and it starts pushing you back towards something like Avenging Crusader and the melee wings Paladin. I don't think most Paladins want to be in an environment where they're just kind of executing a damage rotation and proccing a bunch of healing for it, but I have a feeling that Lightsmith Paladin is gonna have some legs to it, especially when it comes to a raiding environment. I'm really eager to see if this is gonna be confirmed in our first raid test when it comes out. I could be wrong in this one, but I'll keep you posted. Last up on our A tier, we have Preservation's Flameshaper Evoker tier set. This is the 2-piece, is Engulf is stoking your inner flame, gives you this buff, which increases your damage and healing over time by 40%, and increasing your chance to gain Instance Burst by 50% for 10 seconds and stacks twice. So Flameshaper, if you haven't played it, is more of a raid focused type setup, and that's where most of my analysis is going to kind of come into here, in that you are often having a lot of moments where you're setting up these huge raid ramps and you're trying to use your engulfs for really heavy amounts of burst damage. We saw it in Nerebar Palace, where every single stack fight, you would just leave the majority of the healing to the Preservation Evokers because they did it absurdly well. That means, again, if you're putting your engulfs back to back, you're going to be getting these 2 stacks, increasing your damage and healing over time by 80%, and you're increasing your Essence Burst to, you're getting a lot of Essence Burst out of it in the process, which is going to give you even more free Essence spenders, potentially more Echoes to set up more insane bursts of healing onto your raid. Also, your 4-set bonus, consuming Essence Burst during your Inner Flames, and keep in mind, it's a 10-second duration, which you can stack an additional time, so it can last for a long time. Anytime you're generating this Essence Burst, you're then spending it with the 4-set bonus, and that fires off an Essence Bomb at your target, damaging nearby enemies or healing nearby allies, reduced beyond 5 targets. Preservation with Flameshaper has really carved an incredible niche for itself whenever the raid is stacked. You can have close proximity to your raid and just be blasting tons of burst onto them. Now, there's been some fights in Undermine that were pretty good for that, some of them not so good, but this kind of outshadowed it. A set bonus like this, which does a ton of healing, it's going to be very interesting to see how they could potentially be nerfing this, because if there's a lot of fights where you can have the entire raid stack for long periods of time, that'll fit right into the niche. It's much rarer that healers are brought because the healing profile that they have, because a lot of healers are not as impacted by stack encounters as they used to be. They're Resto Shaman used to be so focused on being stacked a long time ago, but that's not the case today, as an example. Well, Preservations with Flameshaper has built itself an incredibly strong niche, and I think that this tier set bonus is going to be absurdly broken the first time that we see it on raid testing. So I hope we can confirm this. It also does really well against heal absorbs, having the stacked bursty healing, and that's what a lot of encounters throughout this entire expansion have held for us. So I can only imagine if that trend continues in the next raid, which, I went over a couple of the boss abilities and I was already seeing massive heal absorbs everywhere. This is definitely one to watch for being one of the most busted ones when raid testing starts coming around. Most of the time you don't really play Flameshaper in M+, I think almost never, in fact. So I will focus this mainly just on raids. Moving down to the B tier, these were selections that I thought were either fun and lower performing, or had some decent performance, but it might be a little bit more niche, or not as much creativity coming in to actually yield out that value. Starting it up, we've got Holy Archon. The 2-set bonus, Halo, reduces the cooldown of your Holy Word Serenity and Sanctify by 5 seconds, and Resonant Energy, which is the healing increase you get for putting up halos on your allies, that also increases the healing of your holy words by 5%. So keep in mind, Resonant Energy is a buff that stacks, and being able to stack up not only increased healing in general, but increased healing for your holy words is really extremely helpful. 4-set bonus, while Power Surge is active, every 2 casts of your Serenity or Sanctify adds another effect to the next halo that you're casting up to 2 times. Big thing here is that you're going to be able to get out multiple additional halos out onto your allies, kind of coating them in a buff to make your holy words feel a lot stronger. This works really well from what we had in Nerebar Palace, where you were able to combo halo and your apotheosis together, get a lot of surge procs out of it, which were also giving you cooldown reduction for Sanctify and just pounding out 1,000,000 holy words to be able to blast healing constantly. This sort of doubles down on that and continues this sort of cycle, continues this sort of process. It's really good for healing environments where you have a longer sustained period of damage that you can benefit from the longer buff of Resonant Energy, and of course benefiting from the consistent extension of Apotheosis, which was introduced in this expansion. Those are kind of comboing the effects together, and that's pretty good on certain healing encounters where you want to make sure you have a lot of healing for a really, really long time. But it's also not as flexible as we have for Oracle. So I think this tier set is good. It's pretty fun to play with, but what I noticed with using it in a dungeon environment is I'll put all these sort of buffs together and it further incentivizes value out of Apotheosis, but damage doesn't really work that way in a 5-man. You usually will have you know, the Cinderbrew meadery, you'll have kegs going off for 5 or 6 seconds of huge damage, and then you have like 10 seconds of downtime, and then there's another 5 or 6 seconds of huge damage, and then there's some downtime. You know, you see the same thing with like the Paladin pulls. Burst of damage, you top everyone, you burst everyone, you top everybody. 7 seconds of like big damage, and then, you know, 10, 15 seconds of downtime. That's where Halo and Apotheosis being comboed together gives you absurd burst, but then you have another minute to get your Halo back. You have, you know, the minute and a half or so, depending on your Apotheosis duration, to get that back. You're trying to combo these effects together, and once you've used them, they're gone. And that's why I think, you know, Oracle Holy Priest, especially in a 5-man superior, this kind of just doubled down on a very specific niche for Holy Priest in terms of its healing profile, which is great when Halo's super powerful, but it's not as flexible. And I think the flexibility is huge, in particular in a 5-man environment, and then in a raid, it may matter, it may not matter. I think this is going to be super fun to play with. I think it's going to be great to have that extra feeling of bonus Halos that you can do, and if you combo correctly, you can skyrocket in terms of your healing output. Don't think it's as fun as Oracle, and that's why we have it here. Next up, we've got the Voidweaver Discipline 2 and 4 set bonus. Void Blast and your penance damage is increased by 40%, and Void Blast cast time is reduced by 20%. The 4 set bonus is causing Void Blast. Again, it's the shadowy smite replacement when you have your Rift out. This is now also causing your Entropic Rift to grow. The larger that your Rift grows, the more like ticking damage that you're going to be doing to enemies, so it's really big for blasting lots of DPS. Also, Collapsing Void increases Entropic Rift's damage by an additional 10%, and the damage of your next Mind Blast is increased by up to 200% when the Rift collapses. So this sounds like a lot, but there's a lot of elements that are lacking. For one, getting faster casted your Void Blasts feels satisfying, looks fun, makes you feel a little bit more powerful. Getting the extra penance damage, for example, can be really good. Keep in mind, though, there's some baseline talents and like Oracle that start buffing a lot of those abilities. You know, you have like baseline additional penance damage when you are playing as like Oracle. And so Voidweaver starts bringing up some of this damage in some elements, but you're also not casting as many penances. Void Blast causing your Rift to grow is really good if you're trying to do a lot of damage, but it doesn't convert into a huge amount of healing for your allies. And the spec really is so focused on just blasting a lot of like even AoE healing and not being able to like pre-mitigate a lot of damage. It's fun to play with, especially if you are just kind of smashing buttons, stacking a whole bunch of haste, and there's less threat of like heavy hits that'll take somebody from like 100 to 70 or sorry, 100 to 20 or something along those lines. Yeah, it's great. I feel like it's one of those things that when you get into higher keys, it gets more frustrating to play around. Maybe that's just Oracle being really, really nuts and the tier set being really, really nuts. Voidweaver feels fun and the numbers look big, you know, like 200% extra damage in your Mind Blast. But Mind Blast is usually one of our weaker abilities that gets cast before damage happens or you know, just before damage happens. You're usually not getting a lot of value out of the atonement healing that Mind Blast does. I feel like 200% is even like really low for it too. So it's fun, it's cool, but I don't think it's putting Voidweaver in a good spot to be competitive with Oracle right now. Next up, we have Master of Harmony, Mistweaver Monk. The 2-set bonus, gaining vitality. So Master of Harmony is all about building up your vitality through your healing, in some cases your damage, to be able to spend when you activate Thunder Focus Tea, and spending it on additional damage or additional healing onto your allies. So the 2-set bonus, gaining vitality, has an increasing chance to cause your next Tiger Palm to unleash a Harmonic Charge, which deals nature damage and it procs some healing onto your allies. The 4-set is casting Thunder Focus Tea guarantees that your next 2 casts of Tiger Palm will trigger a Harmonic Surge. So the Surge itself is, it's almost like another layer of like consistent trickle healing. And a lot of times when I played Mistweaver in the past, it feels like in a 5-man environment, which is usually where you play Master of Harmony, you have all of these small trickles of healing that stack on top of each other and provide a really high layer of consistent output and safety for your allies. So Master of Harmony with the tier set bonus here kind of just continues that trend and plugs some additional healing into your Tiger Palm casts, which usually feel like they're the weakest since you're building them up and really casting them so you get stronger blackout kicks, which actually feel like they do reasonable healing. So now it's almost like you're playing a fighting game where each like punch, kick, and uppercut is all contributing like similar amounts of healing along the way. Pretty cool, I guess, but it doesn't really add any sort of extra element that makes you think. You know, you may have just the additional like cast Under Focus T, hit a Rising Sun Kick for damage, and then you're going to hit, your Tiger Palm, which is buffed up for the Harmonic Surge, into another Rising Sun Kick, into another Harmonic Surge, Tiger Palm, into, another Blackout Kick to try to get another Rising Sun Kick or something like that. You're just adding another element to the equation. It's not kind of blowing my mind or anything insane like that. It does good healing, I guess. Yeah, it does pretty good healing, but it's just all right. Cool. Yay. To round out our B tier, we have Keeper of the Grove Resto Druid. The 2-set bonus, casting Incarn or Convoke, calls upon the assistance of a Dryad for 5 seconds, the cast Trank at half effectiveness, and instantly regrowths your lowest ally at 200% effectiveness. And what all this means is this even works with Reforestation if you're proccing the Incarn from that. Works with your Convoke casts, all that good stuff. You're getting the extra Dryad. It's cranking out some additional Trank healing. The Trank buffs that you may have seen, keep in mind they're only a real net buff for 5-mans, and group size is lower than 20. At 20, it's net neutral, so don't worry really about that for a Mythic raid. The biggest thing is that it's just kind of adding a little bit of output on hand when your Dryad fades. Also, your next 2 Swiftmens heal for an additional amount equal to 5% of your healing done while it was active, and splash 25% of their healing onto nearby allies, reduced by on 5 targets. When I was playing with this in a 5-man, of course, Keeper is mostly focused on raid, or you most commonly see it in raid. You don't really see it that often in 5-mans. Even in 5-mans, it really didn't feel like I was noticing when I would have the Dryad out or anything like that. Of course, you can't Verdant Infusion, Swiftmend extend the Tranquilities from this Keeper of the Grove tier set, so you're not able to play off of that or anything. It was just kind of whatever. And I think that we'll probably see something similar for it when the raid comes out. We get some raid testing going on to it. I would be really curious to see if it's going to contribute a huge noticeable amount or something like that. We'll have to see. But it also, I guess, kind of follows on brand with some of the other tier sets that didn't feel like they would be super impactful, super noticeable when you have access to them and have some sort of gameplay implications for them. But that being said, I feel like the Druid hero talents have been a lot more disappointing to me personally than some of our other options. So I guess it's on brand. And our only C tier list on here is Farseer Resto Shaman, okay? Ancestral Swiftness. This is the replacement for Nature Swiftness with Shaman. This summons Grandma and Grandpa with Farseer, which is where you have these ancestors getting spawned with Unleash Life and with your Ancestral Swiftness that copy your spells, replicate them, all that fun stuff. So Ancestral Swiftness summons an additional Empowered Grandpa for 15 seconds that deals increased damage and healing. Whoop-de-doo. Also, whenever you consume Ancestral Swiftness, it reduces the cast time of your spells by 8%, the mana cost of your spells by 8%, and increases the recharge rate of Lava Burst and Riptide by 16% for 8 seconds. This one also feels pretty mediocre. Now, you ideally are using Unleash and Ancestral Swiftness in quick order if you have them both together, and then trying to make sure you're casting as many spells as you can. So cast time reduction helps you get more ancestor value. Mana cost reduction, sure, you can cast more spells. And it increased the recharge rate of Lava Burst and Riptide. Now, this could be pretty helpful if you wanted to just start chucking, Lava Burst at the target and everything and get many of them in very quick succession. Just in general, getting an additional ancestor out is going to help your burst healing when you're playing as Farseer. It sort of doubles down on a lot of the little gameplay elements that you see. That being said, it doesn't make Farseer any easier to play, and that's pretty much the crux of the issue why people are not playing Farseer Shaman. It's really, really strange. It doesn't feel like a very powerful or super noticeable extra bonus. A lot of times, if I have the ancestors stacking their heals onto mine, sometimes it's just difficult to interpret if I crit or if the ancestors were getting me some additional value. That's often how I feel when I play Farseer, is I don't really know what the additional effects were. Did I crit? I'm stacking as much as I can. Was that the actual value that I had there? And I think Farseer has really been lacking in a ton of development, and I think that the tier set bonus is not helping its case at all. Farseer is the only hero talent, I think, for any healer that hasn't had a place somewhere, whether it's in raids, whether it's in N+, being optimal at least one time. There's definitely people who play it at a super high level, not knocking them, Lauren's the GOAT, but they should be making this more desirable to run for everybody. That's kind of the point, I feel like, of hero talents. And so super disappointed that the tier set bonus doesn't really help in that vein. And I don't think it really makes you feel that much more powerful. I don't get excited with this at all. It's very difficult to connect the healing or damage that your ancestors are doing until you look after the pull. I don't feel it in the moment. You know, if I'm playing DPriest, I have these premonitions out, I noticeably feel the impact in how I'm playing. I don't feel that with Farseer Shaman, and I think that's kind of where I think this is a fail. That being said, having one fail on a big list of healer tier set bonuses, that's a pretty good overall track record, I would say, for Blizzard. I think most of these healer tier set bonuses are really fun, really engaging, and most of them highlight the strengths of what they're already good at, doubles down on it, and in a lot of cases, the best cases, they make you think more about how you can maximize the set without adding more buttons or anything into the equation. It's an interesting skill gap that gets added in, and it's temporary from the tier set bonuses, so it's not like overall perma bloat. If we kept having that every single season stacking, then we might have a problem. But I think these are really fun so far, and I'm really excited to see them in raid. So thanks for tuning in. Big love to our patrons for making all this content possible. Check out the stream and like and sub. Let's go. All right. See ya.